Welcome to the Provider's Report, where we delve into the world of value-based healthcare. Our mission is to empower healthcare providers with the knowledge and tools they need to deliver exceptional patient care. Each episode, we explore best practices, innovative strategies, and real-world examples of how to achieve the highest standards in patient communication and outcomes. Join us as we transform the future of healthcare, one conversation at a time.
Today's episode is sponsored by The Smart Chiropractor and their new book, The Payday Practice. So I'm sure you guys have heard of Seth Godin, Gary Vaynerchuk, and Tim Ferriss. How do you think they would build the ultimate healthcare practice? The answer is in this book, The Payday Practice. Doctors Jeff and Jason will show you how to cover your monthly expenses in one day, every single month, guaranteed. Whether you want to grow financially to support your physical practice or create the digital healthcare practice of the future, this book is your blueprint for building it, launching it, and growing it. As someone who is currently in the process of building my own private practice, I knew I had to share this with you guys. Get your free copy today at www.thepaydaypractice.com. Their step-by-step guide to financial freedom will show you how to 1, set your dream, visions, and goals using their financial freedom formula. 2, build a health tribe of people who are engaged and ready to go all in with your business. 3, create an irresistible membership offer for your clients and patients. And 4, launch and sell out your membership in the next 30 days. The Payday Practice will show you the exact step-by-step process that you can use to generate monthly recurring revenue in your practice. Get your free copy today at www.thepaydaypractice.com. I also recommend checking them out at The Smart Chiropractor on Facebook and also Instagram at The Smart Chiro for more amazing knowledge to take your practice to the next level. Hello everyone. Welcome back to Better Doctor Project. As quite a few of you know from social media, I just recently opened up my own private practice around the holidays, which has been amazing, but as you can imagine, I needed to take a little bit of time away from the podcast, which is really hard to do. I'm really excited to be back. We have a great lineup of episodes coming your way over the next couple months. I just wanted to thank all of you guys for your support and your patience during this time. And because we had a little bit of a lapse with episodes, I decided to bring it back with an extra long one with a lot of opinions and really good challenging mindsets to it. We brought on Eva Minkoff, who is a legit mastermind. She has incredible perspective when it comes to healthcare and looking at what our problems are, where we can go from here, and what things we do well. So I could literally talk to her for hours, but we made this episode a while back and it is pure gold. So I really hope it challenges you guys to think maybe in a different way than what you had been previously. I hope you guys enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Better Doctor Project. I'm really excited for today's episode. We have a friend of mine on and she's fabulous. You guys are going to love her. Her name is Eva Minkoff, and we're going to be chatting today about something near and dear to my heart and so many of yours. We're going to talk about the current issue with the healthcare system and what we can do as healthcare providers to make it better. So Eva, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm truly thrilled to be here, not just to talk to you, which I'm happy to do anytime anyway, but also to talk about this topic that not only is near and dear to my heart as a professional, but also as an individual, as a patient, as a person in this world. So thanks for having me on.
We're thrilled to have you. I would love for you just to dive into your background, and it's pretty interesting. So I would love our listeners to know where you come from, what you're doing professionally. Tell us a little bit about your husband, of course, as a physician himself, and just what your passions are and what you're active with right now.
Sure. Well, I'll do my best to make it bite-sized. It's a little difficult with me. I've never a dull moment in Eva's life. But in short, I was practicing to be a clinician, or I went to school to be in medicine and neuropsychology. And then I decided to go into nutrition science. And the long story short is that as much as I love science, I didn't want to be a clinician. And I discovered that after I got those degrees. But I have always felt undeniably passionate about healthcare, but specifically about people in healthcare and wanting to support people. And when I say support people, I mean both the caretakers and those being cared for. This came about partially because I have been a chronic patient my entire life. I've been seeing specialists since I was 12 years old. I saw doctors before that probably, but I remember starting to see pediatric specialists, like the top docs of New York City, when I was 12, all for this inexplicable pain in my right shoulder, as well as other random pains in my body. And fast forwarding many, many, many years, that's been 20 years since I saw my first specialist. I only got properly diagnosed a year and a half ago. And that's with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I also have fibromyalgia and mast cell activation syndrome, possibly POTS and some others, because it seems like they all come together like one big happy family.
They like to hang out.
They do like to hang out, yes. And there are so many reasons for my lack of diagnosis and also bumps that came along the way. And I'm not one to usually point fingers, especially not in one direction. But what I have to say is at the end of the day, there are at least two people involved, right? There's the patient and the care provider, let's say. What term would you like me to use here? Because there are so many terms we use. It's the Better Doctor Project. I can just say doctors, and we know what we're talking about here.
Totally. Providers, caregivers. I mean, we're all the same. We should all be the same in any respect. So,
right. You're providing care to this individual. Right. Anyway, and then of course, there's the healthcare system, which you can see as like, I guess, another entity if we want to give a third player. Healthcare system, though, involving pharmaceuticals, insurance companies, hospital systems. There's also subsets to those. Anyway, just to give a little context in case it ends up being relevant, because it may be, I was a professionally trained ballet dancer for my entire youth. And that in some ways exacerbated my EDS and also made it better because I'm in some ways much stronger and therefore able to keep my joints in one place. But because of this, I think I was also misunderstood or overlooked because I was a young girl who's a dancer, thought to be dramatic. Some doctor just told me to stop dancing and he thought it would fix all my problems and didn't understand that that was my identity. So he said it very carefree, like, oh, maybe you should stop. And because we didn't have that connection, and I'm not saying he was a bad doctor, but I've clearly never forgotten about that moment. And that was when I was like 14. And so being a dancer is not just part of my identity as this young girl who grew into something that she was doing pretty much every day of her life, but also it shaped my identity as a patient. And then another rather large part of my life, if not the biggest part of my life and best part of my life, is my husband. My husband is a pediatric gastroenterologist, and I met him 6 weeks into residency. So a fresh doctor on the market. And those of you who have done medical school and then residency or intern year, right, the first year, it's a doozy. I met him really in the throes of it. And it just goes to show that we were willing to make it work. I still don't know to this day how he did, given that like he would go to work at 6 a.m. or earlier every day. But we did. And thanks to him, all of the experience that I've had as a patient and working in healthcare, because I didn't mention that I've done God knows how many internships and jobs during all of my training. He is the greatest educational resource I've ever had, for sure. I've really gotten to see what it's like from his perspective, his colleagues' perspective, what it's like from an organizational perspective for the doctors. And I already knew that they, to sum it all up, suffered in a lot of ways. I knew that. I did. Right. But I was able to see specifically where their limitations were, where their hardships were, where the gaps were in their knowledge. My husband is one of the most compassionate people I've ever met. It's why I fell in love with him. And even him, I'm not going to throw him under the bus here, but even he misses things or just doesn't know how to communicate in certain ways because he's not taught to.
Right.
And not only is he not taught to, if there was room for him to figure it out himself, there isn't room. I guess that's the point. Maybe he wants to figure it out, but there's no room. There's no room financially. There's no room in terms of time. There's no room in terms of resources. And he's trying. And every time he tries, and then there's something else thrown in his face, like, oh, well, I got to take care of this so my patient doesn't die, or my patient doesn't, become more ill. It's priorities. And I don't blame any doctor, any healthcare professional prioritizing the patient's health. I mean, they have to. But what we don't realize, because we don't have that, quote unquote room to take a step back and think about it, there's so much that can be done in order to better help them with their health. It seems like it's to the side, like bedside manners. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'll get to that when I can. Mm-hmm. When it's such a huge determinant of our health outcomes and well-being. I've just gone on a major diatribe, but I warned you. I warned you this.
I love it. I hope we have many, because as you know, I've told you this before, I could listen to you talk forever. And you, for the first time ever since I've known you, you made me realize why. It's because you have every outlook from a patient perspective, academic perspective, and provider perspective, and even organizational perspective. So there's no room for bias with you, which I really like, because if you get a group of 10 physicians or 10 healthcare providers and talk about this, it's totally one directional. If you get a group of 10 patients and talk about this, it might be a totally different direction, right? And same thing with maybe like hospital administration. But I feel like because you've pulled from all of those directions, you have this better, clearer picture, which is why you're so perfect for everything you're doing professionally, because you're able to see through that bias and see through all the nonsense and just focus on what actually matters.
Thank you. I do think that puts me in a unique position. The only problem being there that I'm not a long-term or like official person in any of those. I guess as a patient I am, but like I'm not a doctor myself, and I am not like an healthcare administrator myself. Although actually a number of my jobs were in healthcare administration, and I was a doctor's assistant, and like I worked in clinical research. I was a research, there's just so many things I've done. So at the very least, I got a good taste of it. And it's funny, in my career, before I've now settled into where I am, I used to see that as a negative, that I would hop around in this huge world of healthcare. But now I'm like, thank God I did, because I really got a taste of all of these different ways of looking at this really scary monster that our healthcare system is. And at least I know where to look. I might not be an expert on any of these directions exactly, but I know where to look and who to ask and what to ask. And I think that's been very helpful. So right now, what I'm doing and has just come to life is I've launched this, I'm producing a podcast network where a number of different podcasts focus on healthcare, but from different perspectives. And I'm not going to share what those are, just in case. But I will say that the reason I got involved in this is because we need to elevate the voices of all of the different players in healthcare. I used to be the podcast host of Invisible, Not Broken. I'm still kind of involved in that, and I love it. But we're talking from the patient's perspective, those of us with chronic illnesses and disabilities. But we can't just be yelling over here and talking about what needs to be done. We need to hear from every single perspective involved. And so this new podcast network that I'm producing called Empowered Us includes and will include, as time goes on, more and more podcasts that speak to the different voices, the different perspectives and angles we need to consider if we want to actually make changes in this world.
I love it. I love it. So speaking of that monster that you just mentioned, the current healthcare system, obviously there's a lot of great things, but sometimes it can look a bit monstrous. In your mind, can you run us through some of the current issues we have, some of the things you've come across in your research? What are we lacking? What is our system like right now?
So again, trying to make something as succinct as possible that is just like something you can tackle for like a century on just as it is now, not even with it improving or getting worse. I read recently, and I'll see if I can give you the link, that only I remember. This was a paper written in February 2020. So this means this was published before the pandemic, right before it happened. And even at that time, it was said that like only 7% of Americans are satisfied with their healthcare system, which means 93% are not satisfied with their healthcare system. And this is pre-pandemic. I'm like, ooh, I wonder what that is now.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah. Not like that's really surprising, but to hear that it's still astonishing, right? And so there are a number of ways we can dissect this and look into why. I did also see this list, and I'm just going to use it because it's a list, and I think it's a pretty good list, but a list of 8 reasons for why this is the case. And I was curious, based on my own knowledge and opinions on the issues in our healthcare system, I was wondering if I could use that filter through all of these points, through these 8 points. I think the greatest issue that is easily, I say actually easily with air quotes, solvable because it doesn't require any legislative change or financial change, is improving our relationships between providers and patients. And so I wanted to see if through all of these 8 topics, if relationship had anything to do with them. And I wasn't surprised to find that, yes, it does. It influences all of them. So,
shocker.
Yeah. Whoa.
I love it.
So some are going to be more obvious than others, but the first one on the list was preventable medical errors, miscommunication, like absolutely miscommunication between the patients and the doctors, and even within the medical system between different doctors. Miscommunication is a huge problem. Poor amenable mortality rates, or premature death rather, definitely miscommunication is a part of that, and lack of adherence and or education from the patient side. And when I say that, I don't mean that we're misbehaving as patients. I mean that because there's a disconnect in our relationships with our providers, that looks like us not actually understanding maybe what they want us to do, us not understanding the importance of what they're asking us to do. And therefore we're not motivated to do it, or we don't know what to do about it. I mean, how often, I don't want to call anybody out, but I feel like all of us at some point have gone to a doctor and we're like, yeah, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, no, it's true.
So preventable, 7 out of 10 diseases in this world are preventable. They're like preventable chronic diseases. And that's just a ghastly number. It's really, really insane. And just side note, that's why we have Chronic Disease Day, which is July 10th, 7/10, every year, is to bring awareness to that. The fact that we have so many preventable diseases in this world, and some are more easily preventable than others. But the point is that if we, I'm going to say, take care of ourselves, and that means a lot of different things in certain capacities, we may be able to prevent much more than we're aware of. And part of that involves our relationships with our healthcare providers. We're individuals. We're not doctors. We're not supposed to know everything about our health. It's great if we do some research and we're in tune with our bodies, but we're not doctors. So having a relationship with your doctor and trusting them to give you the education to adhere to what they're advising you, that's really important. So I'll go a little faster, but lack of transparency was number 3. And I'm like, do I even really need to go into that? I think there's so many issues with transparency on both sides that, cost is a huge one that is finally being addressed a little bit. And hoping it continues in that direction. Number 4 was difficulty finding a good doctor. And this one, I actually really liked that was on the list because I certainly agree with it, but a lot of people don't think about it. One, because they may be very limited in who they're even able to find because of their insurance and where they're located. Though thanks to telemedicine, I'm just going to put like a little plug for telemedicine here. Oh my God, everybody try telemedicine if you haven't already. We've been through a pandemic, and it's truly incredible the kind of time, money, and effort you can save in in seeing a doctor or definitely therapist via telehealth, it's better for, I think, everyone involved. There are exceptions. There are absolutely exceptions. And some things need to be done in person. Chiropractics obviously need to be done in person.
Yes. most of it. Yes.
Yes, most of it. But when not necessary to do certain things in person, telemedicine is such a great asset that we have in this day and age. I really can't say that enough. Happy to talk to anyone about it if they want to.
Yeah, we actually did an episode on it during the heat of the pandemic. And our guest who was on the show was talking about how, the creation of greater ease with telemedicine was actually giving people with, let's say they had a severe illness or psychiatric problem to where they'd never leave their home. That person is now able to receive healthcare or people in third world countries who do have access to some form of technology. They can now have access to some of the better doctors out there just through telemedicine. I mean, people who despise annual physicals can now just tough it up and go on a phone call and have this, physical via webcam and get it done and have have a conversation with a provider, which means that they're getting some form of healthcare annually instead of being that patient that gets one every 15 years. I mean, that alone can help prevent so many diseases. Just to have that follow-up with the provider. I agree with you. Telemedicine is so huge and one of the few good things that came out of the pandemic.
Yeah, I really couldn't agree more. What's crazy is telemedicine was invented in the 1970s. It's not new.
No,
it's not new. I don't want to get up too off track with this, but it's also related to finding a good doctor. So one of the reasons hearing this breaks my heart for a lot of reasons. And that is because it's not prioritized, finding the right relationship with a doctor, this person that's going to take care of your health is not a priority. If we're asking anyone else that we're giving a big responsibility in our lives, that relationship, it matters. You might be seeing this person, if you're really ill, this is someone you're going to see as often as your family members and your friends. People settling for therapists in particular, I have a real pet peeve about that. I very, very much understand that it's difficult. You got to meet with them maybe a few times, and there's the financial aspect, but just my personal opinion. And I've told lots of people in difficult financial situations, it's one of those things where it's worth it to take the time to find the right person, to spend the money to find the right person, or even if it takes time to find someone that you can afford, that's the right person, whatever it may be. A good therapist for you is worth their weight in gold. And that's true with all healthcare professionals. It's just, I feel like you can't skimp on the therapist part. That's one that it's unacceptable for them not to be in a good relationship with you, because it just won't work.
Yeah. That's actually one of the more awkward conversations I have with my patients. Let's say I see on their chart that they have a history of a previous suicidal attempt, or they have depression and anxiety. I'm automatically opening the floor to see how they're doing in their current state. And so when I talk to them about, where they're at, with psychiatric problems currently, I'm always asking, okay, do you have a therapist? And they say, yeah, of course. And I say, great. How often do you see them? And then most importantly, do you like them? And I know every time I ask this, they think it's so weird, because obviously no one's ever asked them. But I do the same thing when I'm asking somebody who has a PT, who has, someone else I need to send them to. I'm like, great. Did you have a good experience when you were there last time? And sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I love my therapist. They're so good to me. And I'm like, great. Let's make sure that they're on the same page as us, yada, yada, yada. But if they're ever like, yeah, he's okay, that automatically opens the floor for me to ask some really important questions and figure out what they're missing, because it is not worth it to go to a provider that you don't click with. I mean, too many things can get missed. You're wasting your time and energy, and maybe you're not even going to open up to that person in the way that you need to have a major breakthrough and to actually get the care you deserve. I mean, with therapy, you're right. It's the most important field for it, I think. And then honestly, for everything else, if you don't like a provider, why go?
Yeah, we actually have that choice in America. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it may not seem like we have a choice, but other countries, while they have free healthcare, which I'm all for, they don't have choice necessarily in who they see.
Right.
So that's the one perk that we do have in our healthcare system. I got to say, we have choice there. And you hit the nail on the head when you said you need to be able to have that rapport, that trust with that person, even outside of therapy, because you like think about, I guess, even hella nutritionist, like not even a doctor. Like you need to be able to feel that they have your best interests and they understand where you're coming from, because there's so many nuances to healthcare that aren't just straight, like whatever that specialty is or whatever that topic is. You are a whole person. Mm-hmm. You are a whole person with a whole life, and they need to be able to see you as that, even if they don't know all of that. Mm-hmm. They don't necessarily need to or are able to know everything about you. They need to see you as a whole person. And that's what connection looks like. You need to be able to be vulnerable with them. That's huge. If you feel like you can't be vulnerable with your doctor, your therapist, then there's,
if you're listening, just get a new one.
just get a new one. Just get a new one. If possible, what I'd like to suggest people to do, and this takes a little mental effort, is to speak up before dropping them. Also, having a heart to heart with them and be like, I don't like what you're doing, or can you please do this? Or like actually just be open with them, yes. Be real with them and say like, hey, I want to make this work. What's happening right now? This is not working. Mm-hmm. I need you to listen to me. I need you to do this. Whatever it is that's lacking. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean barking. I say barking sometimes because I feel like that's how it comes off on both sides, not just the patient, but it's like, we are over here, like kids, like, see me, listen to me. And while we should be, it's not necessarily going to be proactive if we're doing it in such a manner, but rather advocating for ourselves and be like, I know you want this relationship to work. I know you want to get out of here faster. I know you want me to not come in anymore or something like that. Like, let's work together on this relationship. How can we make this better? Yeah. So if you think it's possible, see what you can do with your provider to make that relationship work. But of course, if it's not, head out.
Agreed.
Yeah. But I was talking before about miscommunication, and miscommunication, it's a big word, encompasses a lot. And some of that really is just not communicating in a way that the other person understands. It's not even that you're saying something wrong or missing something. It's just that you're not speaking each other's language, so to speak. And sorry, doctors, but this is something I'm going to say, especially medical doctors, and that this is opinion. I mean, I have seen it a lot, but my opinion is that a lot of medical doctors talk to patients like they're talking to doctors.
I know personally, that was the hardest thing for me when I first graduated was, obviously you have to be a professional and be educated and knowledgeable with your patients, but they don't want you to talk to them like you're reading from a textbook. But that's what I did, Eva. Like my first couple years, I was so used to speaking in that manner. And I had to really learn. I mean, there's a way to blend both, I think, too. Some patients do want to learn from the experience as well and learn some medical terminology and learn, all these things. But ultimately, you have to talk to them like they're a person. Yeah.
You have to figure out what they want, how they want to be spoken to, get on their level. And sometimes, absolutely, people want the medical knowledge straight up. But you have to gauge that. And sometimes that means asking the patient, what is it that you understand? Oh, no, it definitely means always do that. Please always do that. Actually, what they understand. That's not what I really meant. Whatever it looks like to get on their level and make sure that they're hearing what you say, not just hearing, but absorbing it, agreeing with it, that they can have a further conversation on whatever it is that you're saying. There's that saying that you should be able to explain anything like a 5-year-old.
Yes. Yeah.
What is that? It's something like that.
Yeah. If you know something truly well, like if you're actually an expert in something, you can explain it to a 5-year-old and they would understand it. I think you can flip it like that too. But like you should be able to say it in 5-year-old terms. And if you can't, you don't actually understand what you're an expert in.
Yeah.
That's how it was explained to me. But yeah, it makes sense. Like you should be able to, and I hate the phrase dumb it down, but you should be able to explain what you're passionate about to literally every kind of person, whether that's somebody that does want to hear the elaborate, medical terminology, whether they're in high school and they only care about certain things, whether they're a small young child. I always praise my husband for this because his gift is speaking to pediatric patients.
Oh,
Like he
wow.
can literally explain anything to them. And I truly think they understand more about the spine than my adult patients do. Like it's just his gift. Like he can just completely change his language into their own words based on what age they are. It's incredible. And I think that's why he's so successful with kids.
That's magical. That is absolutely magical. And it's something that my husband has developed and he's very good at now. Sometimes it's like the parents, I'm actually now a little harder on him for. I'm like, I know that they're not the kids, but that doesn't mean you talk to them like doctors either. But still, it's very difficult. I'd love for our husbands to get together and hash that out.
They
Actually,
would love that.
I'm very curious. But it's something him and I spoke about pretty early into, especially his fellowship, because in gastroenterology, I guess the conversations he has are now different than what he did in just pediatric residency. And what was the term he used to say? All I know is it was something like stomach pain, or I actually can't remember what or gastrointestinal pain. I don't remember what he said, but it was definitely not something a 7-year-old would say. And I said, what do they call this area? They call it their belly or my tummy, right? Like you have to use that kind of language with them. That's how they identify, like, what do your belly hurts? Where does it hurt in your belly? Like, show me where it hurts in your belly. And yeah, I was like, and again, this is not to make my husband or any provider feel bad. I understand. Like, this is what you were taught. You're dealing with an ever-growing encyclopedia of medical knowledge. It is thrown at you. So many things are thrown at you every second of every day. And then you just want to clock out, your mind clock out at the end of the day. Like, I get not wanting to learn more in a way that doesn't seem directly medically relevant. But oh my, will it make such an enormous impact on your well-being as a health provider, like your connection with these patients, as well as the actual well-being of your patients. Well-being meaning like how they're doing in terms of their mood and their general feeling on how let's say their condition is or their life is, but also like literally their physical well-being can have an impact on. I also want to know, going back to the difficulty of finding a good doctor, it's not just that we as patients, I keep coming back, we as doctors and patients, but we as patients are settling. It's also a matter of the fact that there isn't enough information out there. We just have ratings and reviews, most of which are very skewed. And I feel bad for doctors where they've been thrown under the bus by like one patient and they're screwed. That really sucks. But it's like, okay, we judge you based on you having gone to Brown Medical School. That really doesn't tell me anything about you as a person, as a clinician, in terms of your services. I feel that we are just so ill-equipped to be able to judge doctors. Also recognizing that a good doctor for one person is not a good doctor for another person. Just like, we might both have great husbands, but my husband might not be great for you and vice versa.
Yeah. That's technically so true though. Like you have to view it like that. That's why the review situation is always interesting to me. Like I'll get patients who are like, oh, my whole family goes to this chiropractor and we just love him. Everybody loves him so much. And then I find out who it is or how they practice and they're doing wild things, but just because he's nice or like, they pinpoint certain things that automatically make them want to tell 14 people to go see that provider. And it like clinically doesn't make sense to see that provider or vice versa. Some people are like, I love this provider. I'm in and out really fast. He's very like quick with me. And then he recommends that to all his friends. But what happens if they don't want a provider like that?
Yeah.
Like some of my patients are busy, like New York style, like in, out, talk to me about what's wrong, tell me what's going on, and then treat me by. And then I have some patients who they want that caring atmosphere. They want me to know who they are. And you can't just recommend. You're exactly right. One provider is just not going to be the end all be all for everybody. And that was hard for me to learn too. I'm obviously more of an empath and more of a talker, shocker. And that might not be right for everybody. I had how old was he? Probably like 17, 18-year-old patient today. And I mean, and he maybe said 4 words to me, maybe. And like 1-2 word sentences. Like he only answered my questions because he knew he had to. And like did not want to discuss anything further. And in that moment, I have to recognize that and deal with it, even though I'm like bubbling to ask him about his day. This high school senior is like, dude, just help me with my back and let me get out of here and go.
You got to meet them where they are, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. But no, it's so true.
Yeah. Tell me what else is on this list, though. I'm curious about those last couple things.
Yes. So the number 5 is high cost of care. Mm-hmm. Shocker.
Yep.
But even high cost of care was broken down into primarily drugs and tests. And this goes with miscommunication or lack of relationship in terms of adhering to care, and just a lack of understanding, maybe even in education, that there's so much unnecessary testing done and drugs prescribed. Now, of course, there are huge issues in terms of the pricing of drugs and tests. That's like a whole other thing. But there's also something to be said by our need for drugs and tests that aren't actually necessary, but seem like they're necessary because we're not having efficient relationships with our doctors or just even the healthcare process, let's say. And that goes into actually some of the others, which are a lack of insurance coverage. And I'd say that's more like a relationship between person and system, which there is none. There is none. Mm-hmm. And inefficiencies. So the inefficiencies, there's a long list of those. But one is that doctors, healthcare providers, are doing so much more than patient care, which is the only thing they actually studied to do. Doctors spent 10 plus years of training to be medical providers, not administrative people. And therefore, there's so much clinical documentation, EMR, admin, and it limits the physician's ability to do more care, first of all. And then also it's, again, not what they were trained to do. So there may be errors there as well. And as much as that is unacceptable, it's also like, what are we supposed to do about it? We're asking people to do things that they weren't trained to do. And then there's the whole problem with, if they're in their own practice, then they have to pay people to do it. And then in order to make enough money, they have to see more patients. It's really just a terrible, vicious circle. There's also a lot of inefficiencies when it comes to just the process of healthcare. And there's so many medical readmissions that are unnecessary. And this also trickles down to lack of communication or lack of information from the patient to the doctor and vice versa. The fact that we can't get all of our medical records in one place for everybody is absurd. And there are so many companies working on this. I went to a tech conference, like the biggest one in the world. It's called the HIMSS conference. I went in 2016. Yeah, 2016. And there were 3 floors this conference, all about healthcare technology. And 2 floors, I swear, 2 floors were based around this problem. 2 floors of like hundreds of companies. So I don't know how that's being solved, right? Because we can't all be doing this individually. But the fact that we all have our health and care information in so many different places, and it's also defined differently in all these different places, it's just a mess. And so just a side note, as patients, what we have to do is we have to take it into our own hands at this point. Maybe there are some of these platforms that exist, absolutely, and use them if you're comfortable with them. I think it's great that they do exist. But at the very least, have your own, whether it be a document, spreadsheet, what have you, where you have everything you can possibly gather and know where other information is stored, like scans or blood tests. If you don't have them in your possession, know where they were so you can access them. Having that information organized in some capacity in your possession is just so important. It'll help your doctors. It'll help your relationship with your doctor. That's huge.
Your understanding as a patient, probably.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's even just bringing the puzzle pieces together for yourself. There may be enough going on with yourself that you didn't realize until you put it all in one place. You're like, I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I
Right.
loved my time at the VA, because before a patient even walked into my door, I could pull up everything that they've ever done. Like, it didn't
Wow.
matter if they saw, a gastroenterologist or their rheumatologist. Like, I could literally see every soap, every document, every image, every report completely in front of me, things that didn't even like pertain to what I needed. I had full access to all medical records. And it just makes me sad, especially because I transitioned back to private practice, right? It makes me sad in private practice that I have to dig to get all of that information, or I only have access to, certain specialties or certain soaps, but I need the patient to go get XYZ thing, or I need to go call the hospital to get all of their images. It's messy. And sometimes, depending on the hospital system, it can be, related. Like in this area, for example, we have Spectrum Health and Metro. Those are like the two big head honchos. If all your docs are in Spectrum, it can kind of be in one place. But God forbid you see one specialist outside of that hospital system. And then, of course, you lose all of those documents, right? So it's just not
Yep.
clean. But I think, unfortunately, the only answer is privatizing healthcare, I would think, like basically being forced to have that. But that would be one of many perks of that. There's pros and cons to both, I think. But one of the major perks of doing that, and that's a whole political argument, but how great would it be to have that, continuity, have a system where everybody's under the same roof with medical documentation? I think that alone would solve a lot of errors too. When,
Oh, for sure.
patients see different providers, it just makes sense.
Yeah, undeniably, I think that would have a huge impact, a positive impact on our
Yeah.
healthcare system.
Mhm.
Medical errors being a big part of that. I lived in Israel actually for a while, and I have chronic illness, right? So like I still go to doctors on a somewhat regular basis. And I remember they have, I don't know what to exactly call it, but they have like 3 insurance plans. So it's like, and you can't have more, I think. It's like they have just 3
For the whole
for the whole
place, the
country.
whole
And it's a
country.
small country,
You're
but it's
right.
still like 13 million people. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's still a lot of people, and a lot of people in tech also.
Mhm.
And anyway, I was part of one of those systems, maybe the third, I mean the largest. And I remember how like it was outrageous that this was such a a difference in what I'd experienced in America. Like that, I was shocked that all of my medical paperwork was in one place, and every doctor knew everything about me when I walked in that room. My dad came to visit me once. He came to one of my appointments with me. And I remember the look on his face when he was like, wait, you don't need to fill out paperwork, and your doctor knows everything about you before you came in. He and I
Yeah.
think that just changed his opinion on the American healthcare system from that moment on, where he saw it in action, where everyone was on the same page. uh, and so yeah, I think there's pros and cons ultimately to private versus public, like paid. But I think what matters most is that whatever choice brings us all to the same foundational elements of healthcare, like all having all the same information, having the same rights, having the same knowledge and understanding, like that's what needs to exist. Private payer, public, like whatever it looks like, that's, I think, what we need at the end of the day is all to be in this together. And a part of that, like I say, in every aspect of what I do is it's relationships. At the end of the day, this all comes down to looking at humans and relationships between humans. And that means the system acknowledging that everyone within it is humans and not dollar bills,
Mhm.
and not technology, but we are people first and foremost. And I think I know it may sound like a little floofy at times, but but I say this having been there, seen it, and known that at the core of everything are people. We make up our healthcare system, and we can't solve anything unless we solve what's happening between us first.
Mhm. Well, and that's a great segue, because you have experience in this. You've seen it firsthand. For those who don't know, she has an incredible TED Talk that I just happen to be fascinated by, and I think everyone should hear it, because And I'm going to link this all in the show notes, guys. I highly recommend watching it. It's just such a great synopsis of what needs to change in our healthcare system. Can you just dive into what that study was about from your TED Talk and the whole purpose of why you did that TED Talk?
Sure. So my TED Talk is called 5 Minutes to Fix Our Broken Healthcare System. So it's 5 minutes. It sounds like, okay, well, that sounds a little outrageous. But the reason why I said 5 minutes to fix our healthcare system is because of a study that I did in college that accidentally led me to discovering something that I thought could possibly help us in terms of one, maybe the biggest shortage we have in our healthcare system, which is time. So without going into the entire thing, this study that I was doing, which actually had nothing to do with time and healthcare, was actually all about happiness. To this day, it's been, like over a decade, and I still refer to it as the happiness study. And it was all about interviewing people based on their expectations in life, whether those expectations have been met, not met, or exceeded, how much they care about those aspects of their life. And then if they had any extenuating circumstances, which meant like extreme things that happened in their life that could also skew whether or not they were happy. So I came up with this questionnaire where I asked people about 10 major parts of their life, like social life, health, family life, financial well-being, stuff like that. And then I would ask them to tell me at this point in their life whether or not it had been met, not met, or exceeded. They'd then rate it in terms of importance in their life. Like, does your social life actually matter in terms of your happiness or not? It doesn't always for everybody. And what was remarkable is that in this study, my whole purpose was to basically prove that expectations define happiness, which isn't really a new concept, but I was doing it in a little bit of a different way. And yes, my study was successful. Woo, nothing really new there. Your expectations will determine your happiness. If you don't know that, take a thought on that on a side note. It's just something for one to explore philosophically about your expectations in life and how that determines your mood. But that aside, when I did this study, I took people in this cardiologist's office. So my family GP was also a cardiologist, and I was in pre-med and I wanted to do an internship, and he trusted me. And he said, okay, I've seen what your study is. Go take people into this extra room and ask them questions. He was so trusting. I really appreciated him. And so I would do that. And this was a doctor's office on the Upper East Side where pretty much everyone that I spoke to was on the older side, the cardiologist's office, very wealthy, and they weren't interested in giving me the time of day. And so when I brought them in the office, they were very reluctant to talk to me. There were very few people who were actually intrigued by what I had to say or didn't. Yeah. Anyway, I spent 5 minutes with each of these people. The questionnaire lasted no more than 5 minutes. And every single person that walked in that room, most of them, again, reluctant to talk to me, left more connected with me than they did with, some of them said, like, their best friends or family members. And it was all because I asked very poignant questions about different aspects of their life that gave me like a 360-degree view of who they were and what they were experiencing. And really, more importantly, their perception of their experience.
Right.
What it was that mattered to them and how they were dealing with whatever was going on in their lives. And that's actually where the third part of the study, the extenuating circumstances, became really important. Because if something didn't align in the first part, like you said, this was really important and it was met, but you're telling me that you're really unhappy, what am I missing here? So I guess what I didn't mention early on, and this is something I'd love for you guys to check out in the TED Talk, but before I asked anyone any of these questions, I had them start by picking a smiley face, all the way from like the most frowny to the most happy looking. And that would identify how they generally feel, not how they actually maybe smile. Mm-hmm. And so when there was alignment, the reason I would say my study was successful is because, all right, so these things are met, not met. This is how they rank them. Makes sense what you've chosen. And there's a lot of information within that on its own, because someone is relaying how they feel about different aspects of their life. And it's a good opportunity for them to talk, or for you to ask more about them, especially if they're important. And then to find something that's really wrong if something's like not met and really important, or there's an extenuating circumstance. Examples of extenuating circumstances are like, you just had a baby, or you just moved, or there was a death in the family, or you have clinical depression, or like something that it doesn't matter anything else that was listed, your expectations and how much they matter to you. What is going on that overrides all of that? And I'm not going to give a spoiler, but I gave an example in the TED Talk. And it is just a perfect representation of how you don't know unless you ask.
Yeah. It's an amazing story. And thinking of that patient, it gives me chills even still, because it just opens up the floor for so many questions we could be asking patients that will directly be related to their overall health in so many ways. And even if it's not, I feel like it ultimately paves the way for you to have that relationship with them in such a short amount of time. And technically this could be pulled. It doesn't even have to just be doctor patient. Imagine asking questions like these to our best friends and our family members. Those people that maybe you've struggled to keep a connection with over however many years. Maybe you guys haven't had a real conversation in however long, right? Maybe you haven't talked about important things. Maybe you don't know things that are overriding their whole life right now, extenuating circumstances, because you just never sat down to have that conversation. This can be applied to so many relationships.
Yeah. I feel like that's true about almost anything that I talk about in this world. Is I love that I can distill it down to relationships. I love talking about relationships. They're the most important thing in this world. So actually, to build off of that, what is considered important, right? Like, the reason that we're bringing this up today isn't just because we want you to ask people more questions. Like, I think most doctors understand that it would be helpful to ask more questions. The big problem here is that there's not enough time. And this study that I accidentally came up with, and I've turned into a resource, it's free. It's not even an actual solid resource, because it's something that everyone would need to craft themselves, really. And it's on patientproviderconnection.com, but I'm sure you'll link that out. It highlights that in a very short period of time, asking the right questions in the right way can make a really big difference. And as you said, it's not even that it's about being medically relevant, but if it's important to the patient, it should be important to you. Like, it needs to be addressed. This person in front of you is saying that this matters to me. And even if you hate what they're talking about, or you're like, wow, that just has nothing to do with what I'm diagnosing you with today, it's still important to them. And you're treating the human that's in front of you. And so what they're saying matters, even if it's just you saying like, I'm so sorry to hear that in an empathetic way.
Yeah.
It is not irrelevant. And that's something I bring up at the end of the TED Talk, because I mentioned what we can do as doctors, what we can do as patients. And as patients, it's on us as well to advocate for ourselves by speaking up about what we think is important, even if we don't think it's medically relevant for the doctor to hear.
I have such a good example of that from today, actually. I had a patient today, and she's one of probably my most difficult chronic pain cases. And she's young. She's got to be only in her mid-20s. She has very, very, very chronic low back pain. She's, being co-managed with me, physical therapy, pain management clinics. I believe, I'm sure an orthopedic surgeon as well. She's got so many providers related to her lower back. Technically, she has clinical depression as well. She comes in most days very somber, and she looks forward to every visit because it's giving her that relief, but she's just got a really sad persona about her most of the time. And today was a better day. And after the end of most of my visits, I'll always ask the patient, is there anything else I can help you with today? Do you have any more questions for me? Is there anything we didn't discuss? Today, I kid you not, she just smirked and goes, yeah, do you like my hair? She had just dyed her hair like red orange, like fluorescent red orange, like the entire thing. And I just kind of took a step back and I just laughed and I said, it looks great. Like, and for 25 seconds, maybe we talked about her hair and she lit up. I mean, I don't even know if I've ever seen her happier. And that had nothing to do with her lower back pain. But in that moment, that just like set her life on fire in such a good way. And to just know that she's going to have a good day meant everything to me as her healthcare provider. You know, like something as simple as hair, you guys. And there's so many ways, you know, we could respond to them asking something so silly and, you know, unrelated to their medical condition. There's so many ways we can respond to that. But to just take a step back and be like, you know, this is important in this moment. This is fun. This is engaging. This is what that patient needs in that moment. I think it's just so powerful.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And that's a really good representation for a lot of reasons. One being that it takes so little time to acknowledge a person and something that's important to them, good or bad. Yeah, really. It doesn't. And that's why I think, while I can't tell exactly what I can't tell any doctor exactly what to do because they know their dynamic of their care and what it is that they need to find out from the patient. And who they are as a person. Like you talk about Enneagrams and whatnot, like everyone's individual and also how they approach their patients. But I am saying that there are ways, and I encourage doctors to figure out what works best for them to connect with a patient, to get the information they're looking for, but information outside of that, more holistic information. And figuring out also how the individual that they're working with feels about those things, because that really can have a big impact in not just their well-being, but how they're going to respond to any kind of conversation around that. You really need to know the context of how they perceive what it is that's going on with them. And I'll give actually like a bonus story when it's not in the podcast, that's not in the TED Talk. So one of the patients that I spoke to in the study over a decade ago he was a professional personal trainer, bodybuilder, like something in fitness where I found out had like a multi-million-dollar business, really successful. He was obviously very fit, very good looking. And he had everything met on his list, and especially everything that was important. And he picked the sad face as well. And I asked him, I was like, okay, so thank you for sharing everything with me. I am curious, I can see things, you've told me things, everything seems like textbook that you should be happy. But you've picked this face, and I'm also gauging from how you're speaking to me that you don't feel happy most of the time. And he said, yeah, I don't. I have clinical depression. And that wasn't listed anywhere that I could see. Wasn't something he mentioned until I asked him. And the relevance, it's definitely relevant to his health, to what extent with his heart health, because you're at a cardiologist. I can't say exactly. It's definitely not irrelevant. It is important as a healthcare provider to know that you have clinical depression. And also, therefore, let's go deeper. Like, are you medicated for that? Do you see a therapist? Like, do you have a history of XYZ? Like, these are absolutely relevant things. I don't remember if he came in for something specific with his heart or it was just a checkup, and it doesn't matter. But it's a huge part of who he is. He has this incredible life on paper, right? But he has depression, and perhaps I don't remember, but at the time, maybe he was not medicated. Maybe he was not being taken care of. And so if anyone's interested in checking out what I've written in this study that turned into something else, I'm happy to also talk about it and maybe even co-craft something with you. This is just something I feel really passionate about, and everyone really needs to make their own. The message here is that I truly believe there is a way to use our time more efficiently to connect better.
100%. And that is the answer, I really think. And I just thank you so much for everything you're doing. I mean, both a decade ago and now, I think you're just a wealth of knowledge. You're you're attacking the healthcare system from all angles. And I don't know anyone else that's doing that. And so I'm just so grateful for you, and to have you on this episode means the world. So I just appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful for you having created this podcast. Truly, this podcast really needs to exist. Don't know why it hasn't existed and resources like this don't exist in the world, or if they do, it's not prevalent.
Well, that means the world too. And we're going to be linking everything so our listeners can learn more about you. We'll link the TED Talk. Obviously, I think, again, every single provider should have access to that and view it. And then everything else we've discussed today will be in the show notes as well. I would just love you to leave us with one last thing for our listeners. For anyone listening who is just thinking, okay, I need to make a decision now to be better in this area. What is your first piece of advice? What can they start doing tomorrow to improve their patient communication? The number one thing you can think of for someone who wants to start fresh.
The one word, and it would seem cliche, but it's just so true. And I really want people to think about this, is empathy. And I'll actually add on to that, or I'll give rather an example of an activity you can try, and then you can apply to your patients. Many years ago, I wanted to test out my empathy for people I didn't know. I don't know why I did that. And
it's your researcher brain. I love it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just decided to do this one day. I was walking around New York City. I stopped at a corner and I looked at this line of people waiting for a bus. And I went down the line of people and decided to look at them and imagine their life. That person has been in love. That person has been heartbroken. That person has been sick. That person has been exquisitely happy. That person has gone to school. That person's been embarrassed. Like, I started creating these lives around these people that were like, a street away from me. I don't know, and I can't even hear their voice. And I made up stories about them. And it was this tremendous practice of empathy for a person that I didn't know. And I really want to encourage all doctors and really all humans on this planet to practice empathy more often. See that person across from you as a person with a whole life. That is not just a chart or a diagnosis or a blood test. That is a person who has had all of these things that we've spoken about. They have the same fears as you in life. They have the same wants and needs in life, like food, shelter, water, and love, and to be recognized and respected. Like there are just things about humans that we all have in common. And I encourage you tomorrow, when you go today, when you go into your office and speak to your next patient, see them past who's in front of you, see them past the paper that's in front of you, the screen that's in front of you, and maybe ask some questions you don't normally ask.
Oh, it's amazing. Thank you so much for being with us. That's perfect. We will all take that one step further tomorrow. I know it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Provider's Report. We hope you found today's episode valuable and inspiring. To stay updated with our latest episodes, subscribe to our podcast wherever you like to listen. For more resources and continuing education opportunities, visit our website. Together, we can make a difference in the lives of our patients and truly set a standard for value-based healthcare.